Hi and welcome to Magic Numbers. This is episode number 75, and today we're going to talk about the early data from Mum. But before we go into that, I would like to thank the sponsors. mtgazone.com is sponsoring the stream. I'm writing articles for them. There's plenty of other really good articles about all the formats that are on Arena there, so go give them a check. Click on my articles so people know that I'm doing something that is actually being read. Also, this stream is sponsored by the patrons of my Patreon, and I would like to thank Marius and Pat, who I don't remember if I acknowledged last week, but they joined the Patreon, so that's cool. You can consider that if you have some spare cash lying around. There are some benefits, including access to the slides from this presentation and other ones that I did since I started the Patreon. Also, you can get other perks like asking a question of the week, which we're going to move into in a second. So yeah, with that out of the way, I always start with my small preamble. And today's preamble is numbers can't describe art well. And I think that it does sound very iffy when you read it. And what does it have to do with magic? I think that this format looks to me like there will be a lot of similarities between this and Ikoria. And similarities not in the fact that cycling is busted, but similarities in the way that there are a lot of those 1 in a million decks that you're going to be playing in this format. And I had already one that was amazing and utilized Omen Hawker, the 1-mana creature that gives you 2 mana to use abilities very efficiently. I played against a sweet deck where my opponent just annihilated me using the Invasion of Theros. Invasion of Theros fetches an enchantment from your deck, or no, aura, equipment, or god, and they fetched an aura, and I'm thinking not much of it. Then they managed to flip it, made a 4/4, put another aura on top of it. It was all of a sudden a 6/6 lifelinker with indestructible, and I was dead. And at that stage, they played the second Invasion of Theros and played Helios out of it, which consolidated their win. And this deck will not come together very frequently. But because this format has those options, there's plenty of those small build-arounds that maybe will come to you once in the format, maybe never. Maybe you will see it once in the format, maybe you will see it never. But stay open to that. And data, especially like the large throughput data, is not very good in finding those kind of things, which means that I am a big advocate of data. You know that if you are on the stream, or if you don't know, then yes, I am. But I also am aware of limitations that data shows. And one of those limitations is rare decks are not grasped by the data very well. Those rare decks, this is the moment when your knowledge of the format, your imagination will be quite important, because if you spot a possibility at some stage and you go for it, and maybe with a bit of luck you get there, you can build decks that no one else will, and you can win with those decks. And because you anticipated your plan and your opponents don't necessarily know that plan, you can actually get some impressive runs with decks that data would suggest are not so great, but because the synergy that you're building into them is so high, and the combinations are maybe not counterintuitive, but at least surprising for the opponent that maybe is prepared to play the stock, blue-white Knights deck, you can get a lot of value out of it. So in this format, I would definitely encourage you to use the data to find out which cards are good, but I would also encourage you to ignore the data when you think that you're having something that is spectacular. And, maybe those spectacular decks are spectacular because they do a phenomenal thing. You bring out your inner commander player and try to do the thing. Maybe they won't always trophy, but it's always fun to experience that. And also it's good to get, some skills in recognizing those rare archetypes on your own, because no one is going to help you there, because I'm sure there won't be many articles about playing the enchantments draft in March of the Machine. So keep in mind, data is useful, but keep in mind that using imagination and using this kind of jazz jamming of cards that you're presented, and maximizing on some rare synergies that will maybe come once in a format, is going to be very useful for you. So don't sleep on those things. All right. And now to the Patreon question of the week. And this is the question from from Mike. And Mike asked me, I always paraphrase these questions ever so slightly. How do -X removal spells compare to burn removal spells? And obviously, Mike asked me to do data analysis on that, and I gave it a cursory look to see what I can find. Because actually, when you think about it, we have a bunch of -X spells that are sort of equivalent to some of the burn spells, and -X has its advantage, burns has its advantages. It's interesting to see if you can compare those. So I picked a selection of top burn spells and top -X spells from last couple of formats, and I came with the graph here. This is based on normalized win rate. So it's hard to compare win rates between formats because every format has a different average win rate itself. So what I did for my set review with Trumpetman, by the way, some really spectacular misses in that set review, I can already tell. But what we did for that to get a sort of coherent and verifiable grading scale, we normalized all the win rates from the last 6 sets or so. Normalizing means win rates are going to be normally distributed or quasi-normally distributed. So there's going to be like a bunch of cards somewhere in the middle, close to the win rate. And the further you go from the average win rate, the fewer cards you'll get in both directions. So there will be very few cards that have a very high win rate. There will be very few cards that have a very low win rate. Bulk of them will be in the middle. Because those curves have different center, they will be sort of moved left, right when you compare different sets. What I did for this analysis, I basically mathematically converted them so all of them have an average of 50%. And when you do that, you actually see that the top win rate of any card will be around 60%. That's like the best bomb in the format, which was the Streets of New Capenna, something Angelic Warden, was it? Something Warden. And it's just above 60%. And a couple of cards above 60. I think 8 cards of 1,900 that we analyzed had a win rate of over 60% when you normalize it. So these numbers might look weird to you because you know Hexgold Slash was busted, but it only has 52.9% win rate, and that is because it's been normalized to the average of 50, and because of that, the win rate becomes slightly smaller than it would be if the card was shown in its actual 17 lands win rate. This is supposed to sort of try to estimate what would be the win rate if we would have all the data from all the players. Because if we had all the data from all the players that use Arena, the average win rate of 17 lands users would be, of course, 50% because we have all the data. So looking at this collection of the cards, I colored the burn spells red and the -X spells in blue. You can see that the burn spells have slightly higher win rates. Of course, there are weaker burn spells that I could have taken into that analysis, but since most of the -X spells were within the -2, -2, -3, -3, and maybe -4, -4 range, I decided not to take those poorer win rate red spells that usually deal 5 damage for 5 or something, because they would be not very comparable with what's going on with the -X spells. But you see that from the cards that I selected, the top win rate is Hexgold Slash with 53 roughly, and Drown and Ichor with 52.7, so they are close to each other. And we have a bunch of cards around 52.4, 52.3. We have Flameless Bolt from Crimson Vow. We have Excavation Explosion from Bro. A Braid that was in also Crimson Vow. And then we have like a small drop, and you got Olivia's Midnight Ambush, a -2/-2 spell, again from Crimson Vow. Lightning Strike, the deal 3 from Dominaria United. Volt Charge at 51% from All Will Be One. And then at the end of that list, we do get most of the -X spells. So we have Disfigure, Whack, Gift of Fangs, Deal Gone Bad. All of those quite markedly lower than the damage spells. And of course, you could sort of conclude from that burn spells are better because they are more versatile. They have maybe some other utilities. But I don't think we can actually say that. I mean, when you think about it, minus x is arguably better to do because, first of all, you can enable attacks, you can force jump blocks, you can win combats with your creature surviving, unlike when you have a burn spell. Like, imagine attacking your 4/4 into a 5/5. If you have a shock, you will lose your 4/4 and you will use the shock. If you have a disfigure, you will only use the disfigure. That gives -2/-2 because their creature will become a 3/3 after the blocks and yours is still a 4/4. So it will win combat. It requires them to use another card to get rid of your stuff. So what does it mean then? I mean, my best guess is that all those burn spells and all those -X cards, they do have additional abilities. Drown and Ichor proliferated, so did Volt Charge. Now, obviously, Volt Charge is instant, Drown and Ichor is sorcery speed. Drown and Ichor costs 1 less mana, Volt Charge costs 1 more mana. The difference between them is actually significant, most likely. Excavation Explosion is better than Volt Charge, even though it's a sorcery speed, but it produces a Power Stone. So you can't very straightforwardly compare those cards between them. Unless we would have like a much bigger selection of cards, and unless we would be having cards that you can actually compare within the same kind of context. Another thing you have to keep in mind is that the color win rates are different. So maybe Disfigure would be a better card if black was a better color in the format that it was in, or maybe Whack would be amazing if white was the dominant color and black was maybe a second one, and Whack was that card that in your deck would be making a difference between being worse or being better. So long answer to a simple question, but when you look at the data like that, it's very hard to remove all those confounding factors and come up with a straight answer. I would say if you have a shock, or not a shock, to deal 2 damage to a creature and disfigure in the format when those colors are similar, I probably pick the disfigure version because it gives me more value. But because the cards are balanced in each format, it will rarely be the case, or probably it will never be the case. They would never put 2 cards that have similar functionality do the same and differ only with the -X versus deal 2 damage kind of situation. But you can't draw that conclusion from pure data because, again, too many confounding factors. Because how can I compare Olivia's Midnight Ambush with Lightning Strike when these cards are, first of all, in different formats, second of all, in colors of different power, third of all, with slightly different utilities that they have. So yeah, that is my short answer. Or for example, I skipped from here Moonrager Slash from the same set as Olivia's Midnight Ambush, which had a low win rate, even though the card is arguably as good as Volt Charge is. But on the other hand, it was in the format where red was relatively poor. So there's the problem with that. Okay. But let's go to the main topic because that's why you are all here. Well, except for Mike, who was actually interested in the -X question. Let's talk about March of the Machine. So I will start today with talking about general stats based on the early data. And I would like to stress very strongly that this is based on the early data. It is going to change in the next couple of weeks. Usually format stabilizes around a week 2, and then it becomes sort of solvable. But in the first couple of weeks, people still don't know what they're doing, including myself. People still experiment. There's a lot of players that play only in the first week and that maybe are not as invested, and therefore some draft bots are slightly more soft in terms of what you can get. So keep those factors all in mind when I'm talking about those cards. You have to, these are not absolutes. This is what we know after first 2 days. And despite the scaremongering that data can help solve limited formats within first couple of days, it's still not true. Some decks are much harder to figure out how to play them than others. card preference will change, and for example, the week 1 best color not necessarily will carry that to week 4, when certain cards will become slightly more contested, for example. But okay, with those caveats out of the way, let's look at what colors are played the most. And for that, I analyzed the 2-color decks, including 2-color decks with splash. White is the most played color. It had 27,654 games. Very important to be precise in there, because if it was 53, it would change everything. But that's quite a lot more than the second one. So that's roughly 3,000 games more than the second most played color, which was black. And then we have blue at 23,800, red at 23,200, and green is definitely underplayed at 21,600. Hi, Mario. And yeah, this is how it looks like in the first couple of days in terms of what people are playing. White definitely overplayed, and we will see that in the win rate data as well, that white is definitely overplayed, and that probably hurts the win rate of white because people play it too much, 17 lands users at least. And the win rate does not warrant probably playing it that much. And let's look at the win rates. There's actually quite close between all the colors except for one, and blue is winning by far the most in the format so far. And 17 lands users, I think, identified it quickly. I'm pretty sure that when we look at those game played data in the next couple of days, blue is going to start becoming more and more drafted because people figured out that this is where the power of this format is. And first days do suggest that that's where exactly the power is. Blue has a 57.6% win rate, and the second best color, black, has 55.9% win rate. This doesn't seem like a big difference. It's like slightly less than 2 percentage points, but you have to keep in mind that those colors overlap in many archetypes. So the differences between the best color and the other colors should not be too big. I think 2 percentage points difference is actually quite a lot. And then after black, we have green and white with 55.6, both of them, so relatively even, and red slightly behind with 54.9. And that's still something. It is a difference, but it's not like a massive difference. I'm not going to say that red is unplayable here. I'm just saying red is slightly weaker than the other colors. And when you look at it, green is underdrafted compared to the other colors because it's drafted slightly less. Maybe people can gamble a bit more in picking green cards. Blue is definitely underdrafted, judging by how much it's winning. White is overdrafted, and black is probably correctly drafted by the 17 lens users compared to in relation to where the win rate is. Another piece of data is this a 2-color format or is it a 3-color format? And my answer to that would be it's a mild multicolor format. First of all, 60% of the decks are strict 2 colors. That's less than in strictly 2-color formats. Normally, you will see that at 80% when you are in the format that wants to draft 2-color decks only. 23% of the decks have 2 colors with some splash. 11% are 3 colors. 3% are like 3 colors and a splash, and there is like 1% of the 4-color plus decks in the format, and just under 1% of monocolor decks. That's actually slightly less than normally. So mono decks don't seem to be the thing here. I think that there's too many multicolor cards, for example. But of course, it doesn't tell us much about is it worth playing multiple colors. I looked at the win rates, and 2-color decks are still winning relatively the most. Let's discount those monocolor decks because they are quite rare. Let's put the laser on. They're quite rare, so I mean, it's not something that you should keep in your mind if you are going to be presented with a pod where you can draft monocolor decks. By all means, do that. It won't happen very often. But 56.5% is the average win rate for 2-color decks. If you splash, it drops to 54.4. If you have 3-color decks, 52.9. But then there is some potential of multicolor decks because you see those 3-color splash, 4-color splash decks. They do have slightly better win rates than the 3 colors, which I think that some people just want to draft 3-color decks because they can get cards from 3 colors. but not necessarily fixing is present in here. There is, I think, a better fixing for 4 colors and 5 color decks in this format than for 3 colors. Because you have a couple of really decent cards that can give you mana of any color. You have the enchantment that incubates, that can produce mana of any color. You have the crew guide, that the vehicle, the 3/2 vigilance, that you can tap a creature if it has power 1 in order to crew it, and then if it's crewed, it can tap for mana of any color. These cards will allow you to splash a lot. There are a couple of really powerful 5 color cards. Again, Invasion of Flywheel Racer. Thank you, Mike. Invasion of Alara is a pretty powerful build around battle where you can play in your deck if you build it correctly. And I think some people are trying to do that kind of stuff, and it actually seems to be working because 55%, 55.5% win rate for 4 color and 4 color splash decks suggests that there is something in building the kind of multicolor decks. They won't come together also very often, sort of like the monocolor decks, but maybe there is something that is worth exploring there. Because if I see 5 color decks that have such a high win rate, that is a much stronger indication for me than to see monocolor decks that are strong, because monocolor decks are usually well, if you are in the seat where monocolor deck is open, of course your deck is going to be strong. So it's much easier to build a strong monocolor deck because you don't have mana problems that boosts your win rate, and it's much harder to build strong multicolor decks because that would mean they are really powerful and they still manage to win despite a very bad mana base. So yeah, there you go. Weirdly, 5 color decks have a very poor win rate, but again, sample size for 5 color decks is really small, so that can be very volatile. Okay, so let's look at the color pairs by popularity. And number 1, Azorius. 14% of the decks in 2 colors were Azorius, and this makes sense to me. This deck has a very pronounced theme. Knights, these themes are usually very easy to crack. So you basically know, I want to put white and blue spells, and my creatures want to have knight on them. And that's why it is sort of early drafting is usually promoting those kind of easy to do decks. But then we have like a bunch of basically 8 archetypes that are almost in the same tier in terms of popularity. Maybe Selesnya is drafted like 11.6%, slightly more than the others. And Selesnya has the counter synergy, and this is another thing that is super easy to identify and try to draft in the early days, because you just see, oh, well, card has put a +1/+1 counter on it. I guess it fits in the green-white. And then you have like Orzhov, Rakdos, Izzet, Golgari, Demir, 10.7, 10.3, 10.1, 9.9, 9.6, all of them sort of around that 10% range. So at least early in the format, except for Simic, which is very underdrafted at 5.7, and Azorius that is very overdrafted at 14.1, there is no really like big outliers. So all of those decks are quite even. And in other formats, we've seen some decks being drafted 20-something% in the early days. So at least from those first days, it doesn't look like there is a big favorite of the 17 Lands users. I'm again pretty sure it's going to change slightly in the next couple of days, because some of those decks underperform even though they're drafted quite highly, and some of those decks that are not drafted very highly are massively overperforming. And that is a segue to the next slide when I'm going to show you exactly that. So yeah, I kept the same order in terms of decks from the most popular in Azorius to the least popular in Simic. But you can see Azorius actually being drafted quite highly has a decent win rate at 58.2. But then we have a dip. Selesnya has only 55% win rate, Orzhov 53.8, the worst actually archetype in terms of win rate so far. Rakdos 54.5. These are not like impressive numbers for an archetype. And then we go up again. Izzet 56.4, that's decent. Golgari 57, that's really decent. And Demir 58.8. So the Demir looks like where it's at right now. It has some really strongest cards. We're going to see later what makes it tick. And we're also going to later see my openness stats for this format, which might tell you something. Then we have two Naya decks, Boros and Gruul, at 54.4, 54.3. These also underperform, but also are drafted slightly lower. And then Simic, 56.3, the most underdrafted deck, is actually pretty strong when you build it. Isaiah is asking, blue is just really, really strong. It's true, yeah. We showed that in the previous slide when we showed the color power. It's 57.6% win rate of blue, and it's way above any other color. So yeah, blue is really strong. And as you can see, when you look at the top four archetypes, we have Azorius, Demir, Golgari, Izzet, Simic. These are top five, and these are like top five in the sort of league of their own. And then out of those five, four have blue, and the other one is Golgari. And then in the lower win rate, we have all the Naya pairs. So we have Selesnya, Boros, and Gruul. And there is also Orzhov and Rakdos. So basically, Mardu and Gruul and Naya pairs are sort of underperforming. Gold Links, very good question. Since Azorius is more contested, is it arguably stronger than Demir? It's hard to answer because we only have the data from 17 Lens users. To answer the question about which color is more contested, we probably should look at all the players, and we're going to look at it at the end of it. And spoiler, yes, probably Demir is slightly less contested than Azorius, but also Demir probably has slightly stronger cards, which is it's very hard to disentangle those two. But you were right that most likely Azorius is more contested on average, and that will make you lose some win points because you win percentage points because you are going to start drafting good Azorius deck, but it will dry out earlier, and you might have like those last three cards in your deck are not going to be as good as your top 20. Okay. Then also, just out of curiosity, I looked at the 3-color cards because 11% of the decks are 3 colors. And Sultai seems to be the best combination at 56.6. That means that Sultai decks are Sultai is better than Simic, weirdly. But also they are better than almost all except for 3 color pairs. So that's interesting to know. Timur is also close there at 55.9, so almost 56%. Again, that's there and about of the top 5 color combinations in the color pairs. And then we slowly degrade. Grixis still has 55, and we have a drop to 53 for Jeskai, 53 for Abzan, 52 for Esper, 51-ish for Jund, 50 for Mardu, and then we go like 49 and 48 for Bant and Naya. I guess that this shows that Bant is an outlier in terms of color combinations that contain blue, in that it's actually quite poor, and maybe there's just not enough synergies within the Bant colors. Bant being, of course, green, white, blue. But I think that when you're trying to draft like Sultai, Timur, or Grixis decks, you are in a good spot that you can actually, if you get enough fixing, you can get a deck with powerful cards because those 3 colors will have powerful cards in them, and that extra power will outweigh the bad mana base. So that there is an option of that. I'd say, yeah, my first trophy for this format came from a Sultai deck, and it was absolutely lovely to play and was sweet and highly recommended. Okay. To the question in chat, this goes on YouTube. I will try to put it tomorrow, maybe. It all depends because it all depends on my work life and everything else balance. But yeah, I will put it on YouTube at least during the weekend, if not tomorrow. So yeah, it's good if you listen to it, even in the format of the podcast. You can look at the slides on YouTube, and of course, if you're a patron, you can have access to the slides at any time. So I will now move to the part where I'm looking at the data And first thing, I'm going to evaluate colors. And here I'm not going to talk about the percentage points of the win rates. I'm just going to tell you what are the best bombs in each color, what are the top commons in each color, and what are the top uncommons in each color. Just to give you an impression, I look at the data from each color because that sort of tells you more about the cards that are universally good, or that are so specific that they're only played in one particular archetype and never in another, which will be the case for some cards. But we will maybe make some comments on those. But I want you to know the universal cards, because when you start your draft, you want to pick the card that is good in multiple archetypes, because that keeps you open to find the right path of picking your draft. And then we're going to move at each color combination, and we're going to talk about cards that are specifically good in each color combination. So bombs in white. First and foremost, Sunfall, the 3 white sorcery, exile all creatures, and then incubate X, where X is the number of all creatures exiled this way. So you create this incubator token. If you kill 6 creatures with it, well, you got a 6/6. If you kill 12, you got a 12/12 soon. And that 12/12 is actually sneakily protected from removal, because it's still an incubator token when you cast it, so you can just keep it hidden, and then next turn flip it, so at least it dodges any kind of sorcery removal. This card has an insane win rate so far. 72% is among highest ever win rates in 17 Lands history, and not exactly the highest. I think that Ashiok from Terrace Beyond Death had around 74.7 win rate in the data, but there and about. And this card is menacing. I had the pleasure of being on the receiving end of it, and it was not fun at all. Needless to say, I didn't win that game. Needless to say, I would have won that game if not for the Sunfall. This card swings games pretty dramatically, and it avoids a big problem of wraths that you are afraid to playing into the board. You're not. Actually, that might be your plan. You play into the board, you make sure that your opponent has to keep up with you, and when they started getting the upper hand in the game, you can make one alpha attack, wipe everything, and enjoy your incubate token. Another bump, Elish Norn. That's a 2 white for a vigilance 3/5 that has a saga that can flip into some other abilities with damage. It just does a lot of things. I think 5 toughness is also really good because it dodges quite a lot of removal. And Elish Norn has a really solid win rate as well. Just not very close to Sunfall, but pretty strong. And then you have Boonbringer Valkyrie. That's a 3 white angel warrior. It's a flyer with backup. So it's a 4/4 with a backup 1. So it can come into play as a 5/5. It has flying, first strike, and lifelink. But of course, it can also send something into the air with first strike and lifelink and swing the game completely. The card is really close to Elish Norn in terms of the win rate. Jorge, Elish Norn, the Grand Celobite, is also a bomb, and luckily I have 17 lands in another window, so I can actually check those things. If you have any questions about different cards, you can actually ask them, and I have access to them, so I can look at it. Oh, you're right. Actually, this is the Grand Celobite that is the higher win rate. So well spotted. Elish Norn is below that in terms of win rate. Still bomby kind of win rate, but yeah, Elish Norn Grand Cenobite has 69.4% win rate. That's the 7 mana Elish Norn that gives +2/+2 to all your creatures and -2/-2 to all the opponent's creatures. So basically 7 mana top kill. Well spotted. But yeah, all these cards, too many Elish Norns for one set for my small brain. All these cards are going to be excellent, and I mean, I'm pretty sure that you can easily recognize that they're really strong. In terms of commons, white top commons, and this is like partially the disappointing part of white. The top white common is Knight of the New Coalition, and the game in hand win rate of it is 56.9, so roughly 57%. That's not a lot. When we look at other cards, they will have a much higher win rate. Knight of New Coalition is, of course, a solid card, 2 bodies for 4 mana, 4/4 stats, vigilance, both of them. That's okay to go wide. But, it's nothing impressive. And that means that potentially white might have a problem. It's also a knight, so I mean, I'm pretty sure that the bulk of the win rate of that card is being played in the knight decks. Then we have Swordsworn Cavalier. This is a more interesting one, I think. 1 and a white, 3/1, which is usually not a card that would be contesting for a top common in the color, but it is so far in 17 lands. Just below the Knight of the New Coalition, it has like 56.7, so like 0.2% difference, which means that it's not different at all. But that means that whites don't have like balmy commons. Number 3, Angelic Intervention, just again, couple of percentage fractions below the Sunsword Cavalier, the 1 and a white trick that gives a creature or planeswalker you control protection from a color of your choice, and then a +1/+1 counter. So yeah, it's nothing like that you would expect to be balmy. White commons look to me like they have a pretty flat structure. So there is maybe like 10 commons that are above 55% win rate. So that's relatively flat, but none of them is like an outstanding piece of cardboard. So that might be the problem that white has as a color, lack of those commons that will be impressive. In terms of uncommons in white, number 1 is the Norn's Inquisitor. That's a 1 and a white Phyrexian knight. So that has a double synergy. It's both a Phyrexian for the white-black decks, and it's a knight for the white-blue decks. When it enters the battlefield, you incubate 2, and whenever you transform anything into a Phyrexian, put a +1/+1 counter on it. That, of course, means that all the incubators are going to be bigger when you flip them, but also all the cards that have regular transform flip into Phyrexians in the set. So they will also become slightly bigger. So you can play the 1/1/2 for 1 mana and flip it into a 5/4 if you have the Norn's Inquisitor on board. And that card has 60% win rate. But then 60% is a good win rate for an uncommon. But then we go to Seal from Existence and Phyrexian Censor, and then we drop into 55.6, 55.3. It means that those cards have a lower win rate than this second and third best commons in this color, which is again not impressive. Which means that if I said that white has a problem with commons, it has even a bigger problem with uncommons. They're all very middling. I don't have a good explanation of why, for example, Seal from Existence has such a low win rate. One part of it might be the cost is actually quite high. The double white and it costs 1 white is quite a lot. And Oblivion Ring effect is pretty good, so I don't know why this card doesn't perform better. And the third best uncommon is Phyrexian Censor, which I'm pretty sure is going to be considered one of the biggest design flaws of this set. I think that this card has a very bad feel when you play against it, because it doesn't let you play your cards and you feel annoyed by that. And it also kills your flipped battles if you don't think about it, because of course if you flip the battle you need to recast the spell, and if you cast something before that to enable the attack that will let you attack the battle, then you flip the battle and you can't cast your spell and you feel miserable about it. So yeah, still card is pretty powerful. It's a 3-mana 3/3. If you build around it, then you can play many spells and your opponent gets limited to 1 spell per turn. Okay. Mike asks, I wonder if Knights has a high floor, low ceiling rate as an archetype, and white will get better at lower rarities once people stop leaning on it. I mean, we saw that. I mean, for 17 length players, Knights is the most drafted archetype. So definitely people maybe, overdraft it slightly, but it has good numbers. It's just I think that Knights are based on blue cards, not on the white cards. That's the thing. White is the support color for the first time in forever in a blue-white aggro. All right, blue bombs. We have plenty of those, and it's so nice to know. I mean, I'm sure it won't stick for forever, but the top winning rate rare in blue is Fairy Mastermind, which is great for Yuta Takahashi. 1 and a blue, Fairy Rogue with Flash Flying. It's a 2/1 for 2 mana with Flash and Flying. Whenever an opponent draws their second card each turn, you draw a card. I had it in my deck. It's so sweet to play it in response to your opponent casting a draw spell, for example, and you instantly get like a card back, and you still end up with a 2/1 flyer, which is super sweet. And yeah, 63.4% win rate. Sorry, 64.4% win rate is good. It's not as bomby as the white bombs. So white definitely has the bombs, but blue has pretty solid cards at other rarities. Then we have Chrome Host Seed Shark, 2 and a blue for sort of Sharknado on a stick. Instead of making flying sharks, it does make incubator tokens. But 3 mana 2/4 flyer is already good rate for a creature. Good defensively, decent offensively. Being able to convert any spell that you cast into bodies is just amazing. So even if you need to invest mana into it, but there are ways. So yeah, Chrome Host Seed Shark is like 0.1% lower than the Fairy Mastermind. And we have Zephyr Singer, a 3/4 flyer with Convoke and Vigilance. And when it enters the battlefield, put a flying counter on each creature that convoked it. So this is one of those things when you can actually take some time off from putting pressure and maybe use like a 6/6 creature to convoke Zephyr Singer, and next turn opponent has problems. And this one has 63.3, so just like 1% below. Sorry, 62.5, so like 2% lower than the other two, but still over 60, which is really good. Notably, all those blue bombs are creatures with flying. So yeah, there you go. Now, in terms of top commons, and this is a weird situation, because actually the top common for blue has a higher win rate than at least one of the cards that we mentioned before in the bomb slot. Preening Champion has 63.3% win rate, and this will put it probably pretty close to Inspiring Overseer in terms of the most powerful commons in the last couple of years. So that's quite amazing for that. 2/2 flyer that brings a 1/1 blue and red elemental creature. Just excellent card and still heavily underdrafted. So Alsa, the metric of how late does it go. A Preening Champion goes on average at 4, which means that 30% or so of the time it will still wheel. I'm pretty sure that it's going to change quite rapidly, but maybe not drastically. It will probably drop by like 3.5, which means that even late in the format, you're going to still get your Preening Champions quite late. Another really great common is Afara's Dispersal, 2 and a blue for a bounce spell. But it costs 2 less if it targets an attacking creature, which is just a lot of power. And also, it does have the Surveil 2, which fixes your draws, which is exactly what you want from a card like that. When you need to use it defensively, you fix your draw, and you will hopefully be able to create a situation when you can actually bounce back from the original disadvantage. And later you can just clear the path for good attacks into battles. You can do a lot of stuff with it. And as the chat very, very promptly observed, the alpha on that card is really high. So that card will wheel 50% of the time, maybe even more. So you can actually, at least in this first couple of days, I'm pretty sure this is also going to change, but you can speculate on if you open it in your pack, you can speculate on it wheeling and hopefully get rewarded by having a great first pick and then getting this one back at the wheel. And the third one is Eyes of Gitaxias, another spell that's 2 and a blue. Just incubate 3 and draw a card, so not much. So basically for 5 mana, you can cast it as a sort of like Seraph Packmate for 1 mana extra, but you can split it over several turns. And there are also ways of doing that on turn 3, which I will maybe mentioning later. So yeah, these are the blue. Commons in uncommon slot, Captive Weird. That card is also grossly underestimated. It's a 1 mana 1/3 defender, and you can flip it for 3 and a Phyrexian red, most of the time for 3 and 2 life, and flips into a 3/3 that exile the top card of your library, and you can play it until the end of your next turn. So you can actually do it on curve. You can flip it on turn 3. You get a 3/3. The 1/3 in between, stop the opponent from actively attacking you or for dealing you any damage. Then you flip it into a 3/3, and you will probably be able still to play the card that you've exiled from the top on your next turn if it's not like 5 mana or something. And of course, you can do it later, and then it basically is a 3/3 draw a card. So another Sarulf Blackmate. And we remember, Sarulf Blackmate was good in all the formats it was in, which was Kaldheim. But I mean, cards similar to Sarulf Blackmate were always good. Just look at the Contagious Vorak last format. It was excellent, and it was like sort of budget version of Sarulf Blackmate. Then we have Skyclave Aerialist, 2 mana, 2/1 with flying, and can flip to draw your card, roughly. Again, another 2 mana, 2/1 flyer that is just great. Just to give you the impression, these cards have both around 61-62% win rate. And then we have another card that goes super late with Alsa of like 6.3, Artistic Refusal. That's the 6 mana counter spell, but it has Convoke, and it does draw you 2 cards and then discard a card. And you can also, if you don't have anything to counter, you can just use it to draw 2 cards and discard a card. That is correct, Jorge. Tetsuko is also having really good numbers, and so does Ingarunais. We're going to talk about those cards later when we will reach individual archetypes. Then we can talk about where they are actually the best in. Black. The bombs, we have Shieldred, one of the Praetors, the new version Praetors this time. I'm pretty sure that I got it right. Yeah, it is the new one, 66% win rate. Again, it does so much that I don't even feel like reading it. Then we have Breach the Multiverse, a 7 mana spell. When each player mills 10 cards, and then for each player, you choose a creature or planeswalker in that player's graveyard and put those cards onto the battlefield under your control. So you basically pay 7 mana, mill by 10, and then you get 2 permanents out of it. I had the pleasure of playing against an opponent who played it and then didn't do much, and I was like super happy that they missed on it basically. And then they just untapped and played the second one, and then they got a tally out of it. It was ugly. So yeah, it is a 7-drop, but it's sort of a 7-drop that will win games quite a lot. And actually, just to prove the point that large costs are not a problem in this format, Hoarding Broodlord, the 8 mana 7/6 flyer, is another card that is in the top 3 of those bombs. Again, 64.4% win rate, which is a lot. And a couple of maybe honorable mentions. Pile On, just a regular 4 mana Convoke removal spells with Surveil 2, has 64.3% win rate. That's excellent. That's just below that. An Invasion of Innistrad, the battle that you can play as an instant and gives -13 something, has 63.3% win rate. These are very close to those top 3. Black has really solid bombs, and maybe they don't have the card at the power of the Wrath, but no color really does. But they have really, really strong cards. In terms of top commons, Deadly Derision, the Grim Bounty at instant, is the best black common. But here, when you look at it, it has 60% win rate, so that's pretty solid. And then second one is Final Flourish, 59.7, so close to it. So those 2 removal spells are where the money of black is really, because then you got to the third common, Nezumi Informant, which has slightly less. It has 57% win rate or so. Still, I mean, I'm surprised. I evaluated this card low before I saw the format, and then it turns out that it's quite solid. So yeah. You maybe saw bad reviews of the Informant. I was one of the people that was thinking that it might not be good in this format, but it is. So there you go. Well, it's a perfect thing to have when you are having Final Flourish, for example. And I guess that discarding cards is much stronger in this format than I thought. So don't sleep on any kind of card discard, it seems to me. Yeah, and I mean, there's a bunch of really solid black commons behind it again that you might not expect. Unseal the Necropolis, Ichor Drinker, Vanquish the Weak, Etherblade Agent, all those cards are solid. In terms of the uncommons, the top black uncommon is Blight Reaper Talid. That's the 2-mana 2/2 that you can transform for 3 and 5-Rex and green. And when you do transform it, or when it dies, you create a 1/1 green 5-Rex and Saproling creature token. So a lot of stats for that 2/2. It has like around 60% game in hand win rate. So actually weaker than the Derision at common, but still really solid. And then we have another removal in Collective Nightmare. That's a Convoke 3-mana instant that gives target creature -3/-3 until end of turn. That is a good card to maybe add to the analysis I did for the question of the week segment, because this looks like a really, really good -X/-X spell. And part of it is being instant, part of it is being able to cast it for 0 mana. 59% win rate, that's pretty solid. And the third card may be slightly surprising to some. Scornblade Berserker, 1 mana for an 0/1. It has backup 1. And it basically can put a counter on something and give it the ability to sacrifice that creature and draw a card. And, you know, like sometimes you might want to cycle thing that is under the pacifism that you have and sacrifice the 1/1 counter on it. Then maybe you can chump with the Scornblade Berserker and sacrifice it for the second card before damage, and you basically got yourself a divination that gained you like 4 life or something. So yeah, a card that maybe looks underwhelming, but don't ignore it when you see it in the draft. It has 59.1% win rate. And just to mention, Merciless Repurposing, the 6 mana destroy a creature, incubate 3 is just behind that. So when you look at it in the commons and uncommons section of the black, 3 removal spells, and then the fourth one just behind it, and then very cheap utility creatures on top of that. While in the rare slot you get like very expensive bombs, and this is, I think, like part of this format that you want to have your commons to be cheap and efficient or removal, and then top end of your mana curve you want to fill it with really bomby things. Talking about really bomby things, red bombs. We have Chandra, that has already like 66%, if I'm not mistaken, or thereabouts. It's super strong, even though red is not a super strong color. Then you have Etali, Primal Conqueror, another 7 mana card that doesn't seem to have a problem with 7 mana. I was on the receiving end of it already, and it hurts when you sort of stabilize the board and you're thinking like, okay, now it's time to accrue my the fruits of my heavy grind and attrition game, and then Etali drops and you're like, right, I'm not only back to parity, I'm heavily behind now because opponent got like a bunch of stuff from Etali. And Rampaging Raptor, 2 red, trample haste 4/4. That always is going to be a solid card, and it is. However, when you look at its stats, it is significantly behind the other two. So like Chandra 56, Etali 65, and then I don't know what happened there. Actually, it should be Invasion of Tarkir has a higher win rate. Maybe I just looked at the rares. Am I dumb? Probably I just looked at the rares. Yeah, probably I did it. And then didn't remember. Actually, the Invasion of Tarkir is a higher win rate at 60%. Yeah, but I think that when I looked at the rare, and then I realized I did it, and then I didn't correct the last one. I just corrected the Chandra. Smart me. So yeah, Invasion of Tarkir is the 2 mana battle that deals most of the time 2 damage when it ETBs, and then it flips into a dragon. That one has a 60% win rate. That's pretty strong. In other mentions, Voldaren Thrillseeker is pretty good at 60%. That's the 3 mana backup 2 creature that gives the ability to sacrifice a creature to fling it at something. But okay. I mean, Rampaging Raptor is still a pretty strong bomb. It would get the mention. In terms of the top commons, I think Volcanic Spite does not surprise anyone. We all played this card in Ikoria, where it was great, and this one is better because it does more things. Deal 3 damage to target creature, planeswalker, or battle. You may put a card from your hand on the bottom of your library if you do draw a card. This is really the ability to hit the battle that has 3 counters and flip it in the opponent's combat is amazing. I mean, I did it, and it ended up with me flipping the blue-black battle that comes in as a zombie that is a copy of something in the graveyard. I had the double strike backup creature in the graveyard. I turned my 4/4 into this, and I gave a counter to something else. And all of a sudden, the combat that my opponent was like almost alpha striking me for lethal turned out into him losing 2 creatures for dealing me 2 damage, and I've completely flipped the game. But of course, it has more utility. It's a good removal spell. It also can help you filter lands later in the game, so it's like never dead really. And it has a really strong win rate of 60% for a common. That's really good. And then we have like Marauding Dreadship. That's 57.2 win rate, so much lower than Volcanic Spite. There is a big drawback, but I mean, it's definitely a card that is underestimated because it has like ALSA of 7.5, which means that you will get you will almost always wheel it when you open it. Almost always wheel it. So a strong card that you can get really late. If you're playing red, then probably this is something that you want to look at. And again, look at those top commons. Rel's Reinforcement is the number 3. That's 2 mana for creating 2 1/1 elemental creature tokens. So we got the Dreadship that makes the Incubate token and creates a piece of cardboard for itself. You have Rel's Reinforcements that make 2 1/1s, and you have Volcanic Spite that can kill something and also, turn something into a different card. So basically, all of them are sort of 2-for-1s. And this is like the story of this format, because when you look at other things, Blight Reaper Talid, that's also sort of 2-for-1. Scornblade Berserker can be 2-for-1 easily. Nazumi Informant puts a cardboard, removes cardboard from the opponents, or sort of 2-for-1ing. Preening Champion, obviously. As far as Dispersal, that Surveil 2 is almost like drawing a card. Eyes of Gitaxias, 2 pieces of cardboard. Norn Inquisitor, 2 pieces of cardboard. Knight of the New Coalition, 2 pieces of cardboard. All those things like at common, like everything that has somewhat putting 2 pieces of cardboard is really strong in those formats, it seems. In terms of uncommons, Furnace Reigns is the top red uncommon, and that tells you a lot. Furnace Reigns is the new threaten effect. So you steal a creature, it gets haste, and gets an ability to make a treasure when it deals damage to a player or a battle. This card is probably 90% of the time played in black-red. And because it's played in this specific deck, it's almost a multicolor card. It's just very strong in this format because there are so many cheap and solid sacrifice fodder. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that you should play it in any deck. You should play it in a deck where this card can be good. So you need your sacrifice outlets in order to make full advantage of it. And also the win rate, 59.7, is not that impressive for an uncommon. Although ALSA is pretty low, so you will get it if you need it, because only one deck wants it, and probably you want to be the only drafter of that deck in the pod when you try to draft it. Stoke the Flames and Invasion of Mercadia are just behind, but like significantly behind by 2 percentage points. So deal 4 with Convoke at instant is really good. And Invasion of Mercadia, again, you enters the battlefield, discard a card, draw a card. That's the natural 2-for-1, but it also can flip into a creature that has like a bunch of abilities that allow you to generate wide board, which is also great. So yeah, these cards are great. And also like just behind it, there is the double strike backup creature in red. It's roughly the same win rate as Invasion of Mercadia, so I should probably mention it. In terms of green, the bombs, Vorinclex, again, a Praetor, they're just super powerful. I'm not going to be bothering reading what it does, but it does a lot. And then second best rare is the Glistening Dawn. that puts 2 incubator tokens on the battlefield, and they have +1/+1 counters for number of lands you control. This card, like on turn 6, you put 2 6/6s, of which one you can instantly flip to block on your next turn. That's a solid ability. 65% win rate for that. Vorinclex says 67. So we're talking like top bombs of the whole format in here. And then Invasion of Ixalan, which looks maybe much less underwhelming compared to Glistening Dawn and Vorinclex. But turns out that the ability to filter 5 cards from the top of your library and get something good out of it, and then flip it relatively easier into a 4/3 with Trample, that is really, really hard to get, because whenever you cast a spell, that creature gains Indestructible. You can actually get like a really solid value of it, and has like 62.3% win rate, which is maybe not amazing, but it's relatively good. In terms of commons, this is like the most surprising thing. And then I gave this card an F in the set review, and it's a top green common. You can't miss more on a card. Like literally, there is like physically difficult to do it. Now, keep in mind, Seed of Hope has a very small sample size. And you can't put it in every deck. You need to have probably like 33 permanents in your deck, 34, 35. Sample size is really small. But actually, when I thought about it, it might not be bad if you play it as a substitute for your 17th land. You play 16 land in a deck that has probably like 9 green sources and 36 permanents or 35, and you're good, because you turned your 17th land into a tap land that, if you are flooded or if you have enough mana, you can actually maybe get a spell out of it, and you get 2 life out of it, which is great. So yeah, that's not terrible at all. Obviously, you probably don't want to put 7 in your deck, because then you will just start flipping 2 of those, and you just like pay 1 mana to gain 2 life, which is not great. So you really need to have, I can't stress it strongly enough, you need to have a bunch of permanents. But it's made easier by the fact that there's so many battles in this format. So you can get a battle which is sort of like a permanent that's also a spell. So maybe you can get some spell utility in your deck by having the right battles in it. Second best common, and that one is played a lot, is Overgrown Pest. It turns out that removing 1 power and 1 toughness from Contagious Vorak, but giving it ability to actually get you a real spell at some stage of the game is good. I played it in a deck with 14 transform cards, and it's just insane how well it works. Because early in the game, you will just get your lands. Later in the game, you'll probably get like a good spell. So it's sort of like Seed of Hope on the stick with a relevant body, arguably for some cost. But yeah, the card is really solid. It has 58.6% win rate, which is not as good as the Preying Champion, but it's not bad at all. And Cosmic Hunger is a good spell. Removal in this format generally is really good. So Cosmic Hunger is probably better than you would maybe expect. This is the bite spell that can also kill a battle if you need to at instant speed. So same kind of utility as the Volcanic Spite. In terms of uncommons, Tangled Skyline is number 1. That's the enchantment that makes a 5/5 incubator token and gains you 5 life. So basically the honey mammoth of the format. 59.6% win rate. Card is good. It goes pretty late. So again, consider it with your picks, because it's actually good. Then Streetwise Negotiator, the basically 2 mana 3/3, but has some other options with the backup. Card that deals damage with its butt. Very good numbers on that. And Tandem Takedown, that's another bite spell, but this time you can team up and 2 creatures can deal with something really big. And also they get a power boost. Careful when you play it, because it can be blown out by removal. Okay, and that covers the colors. So now let's go to the actual color combinations. I select for each archetype the key commons. So one of them will be the best common. In terms of Azorius, it's the Preying Champion. I mean, the card is great, but this is also a knight, so it plays with the synergies. That's important. At 63.9% win rate for a common is just mental. Then I pick a hidden gem, a card that I find maybe surprising that it's good in a particular archetype, or a card that is very underdrafted, and because of that, I'm going to be pointing to it as something that you might want to consider in your picks. And then I put a trap. And trap can be anything from card that has a really poor win rate to a card that is really highly drafted but has under middling results, or a card that I think would have fit in a particular archetype but has disappointing numbers. So maybe you can fall into a trap of thinking that this is what you need to do in this archetype, but the data suggests it doesn't. And in case of hidden gem for the Azorius, I found Bola Slinger. I think hidden gem because it goes slightly late, but also because it's not a knight, it's a cat soldier, but still performs really well in this deck. Being allowed to tap something, attack into a battle is a good ability. Backup on a flyer or something is good. And the tapping of creatures is a really, really annoying ability in this format. It seems it makes combat really hard, especially when you're like banking on having one of those big creatures to stop the attacks. Well, Bola Slinger says, no, I'm just going to tap it and still be able to smash with something. And also because you have like the protection trick. It becomes problematic. In terms of trap, I picked Alabaster Host Sanctifier, a 2-mana 2/2 lifelinker. It doesn't have terrible numbers. 55% is okay, but it's not like great. And the card is picked quite highly. People figure out that the 2/2 lifelinker for 2 is good, and they started drafting it accordingly. And it doesn't have the numbers that will warrant picking it so early. So it's a good card, but probably not in the white-blue. And I have the same for uncommons. The best uncommon is Marshal of Zalfir at 63.7. The Signpost uncommon, which is, tells you something about the color pair. It probably is going to be good in what it should be doing. So the Knight deck is a real thing if the Signpost uncommon is the top uncommon. I remember, I have to double check it, but I do remember that it was actually Execo the Captive Weird, the 1-mana 1/3 defender that can flip into a 3/3 that sort of draws you a card. So it's not only knights that you're going to play in the blue-white. I told you, for those that were there earlier, that I played against some really sick enchantment synergy kind of blue-white. I've seen LSV playing blue-white spells that was also super powerful and based on Wrath, one of the Multiverse Legends. So that's also a pretty decent option there if you can pick some of those good blue spells. So plenty of good Azorius uncommons, and I'm pretty sure plenty of solid builds of this archetype. Now, the hidden gem I picked is Inga Rune Eyes. This card was okay in Kaldheim, but I think here it's way better. 63.2% game and hand win rate is really solid. 4-mana 3/3, but Scry 3 is almost like draw a card when it enters the battlefield. And I think that this is a format when you can engineer those turns when Inga dies along with two other creatures a bit easier than in other formats. So you might actually get this draw 3 cards death trigger if you work on it a bit harder. And the trap I picked is the Invasion of Belenon, 2 and a white siege. It makes a 2/2 blue-white knight creature token with vigilance. When it ETBs, it has 5 defense and it flips into an anthem. And this card has very disappointing numbers all through different archetypes as well. So I wanted to showcase that this card that looks pretty solid is not that solid. It doesn't have the numbers to back it up. It might change. Maybe people will start playing differently, but maybe the anthem effect is not worth flipping it, and maybe people are too much stuck on attacking into it when maybe they should attack the face, but if you want to attack the opponent's face, you don't want to play Invasion of Balanon because 3 mana 2/2 vigilance creature is definitely not on raid. So yeah, trap in Invasion of Balanon. Okay, let's move to Orzhov. The key commons all are black that I selected. Best common is Deadly Derision, the Grim Bounty at instant. Hidden gem I selected is the Unsealed Necropolis. Each player mills 3 cards, then you return up to 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand at instant speed. Card has really good numbers in other decks, but in here it looks particularly good at 57.2, especially that Orzhov is not the strongest archetype, so 57 is quite a high win rate for it. And the trap I selected is the Etherblade Agent. The card is good elsewhere, but it just has quite low numbers here, and it has to be picked highly. So if you were drafting Orzhov, I would think twice before picking it early. Maybe you have better cards for your deck. In terms of uncommons, best uncommon is Norn's Inquisitor. That's not surprising. It's a Phyrexian synergy card, and white and black is all about Phyrexians. 61.3. Hidden gem, because it's still drafted quite low, is Phyrexian Censor. It is a pain to play against, but maybe when you play it, it's much more fun than than when you have to stop yourself from playing spells and get your battles blocked from flipping. 59.3 is really good numbers for that card. I think that it's particularly should be played in white-black. And then you have the trap I selected is Elspeth's Smite. 1 mana deals 3/2 target attacking or blocking creature, and you exile it if it dies. Only 53% win rate, and the card is picked relatively highly. I think the alpha for it is it's 3.6, so it will wheel very rarely, and that means that you have to pick it early. And with these numbers, I don't know if you should pick it so early. Okay, white-red, not a great archetype in terms of win rate. Keep that in mind. Best common is the Marauding Dreadship here at 58.3. Multiple bodies, important. Hidden gem of this form of this archetype is the Golden Scale Aeronaut. I didn't expect this card to be good, but it's actually decent at 56% win rate. And that's the 5 mana 2/3 flyer with backup 1. So you can send something in the air, deal some damage, maybe kill a battle, or you can play it as a 3/4 flyer. The trap that I mentioned is Skittering Surveyor. I think that this card is overrated in general, but especially in this color where 46% win rate is just terrible. So please refrain from playing it. I'm actually going to check what is the Skittering Surveyor win rate across everything. Skittering Surveyor 55.4, so like not terrible, but definitely it's not the top common. It's picked as a top common. So cards that are neighboring it have Alsa of 8 and 7, and Skittering Surveyor has 4.7, which probably should put it somewhere at the win rate of like 58%, 57 to be excused from being played where it is. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure that Skittering Surveyor has better stats in multicolor decks, but still, it's not amazing in the multicolor decks. I'm pretty sure that I want to play my multicolor decks in a way that I would rather play the vehicle mana fixer, because my throat is going off. Key uncommons for the white-red. That was a surprise to me. The best uncommon for white-red was Phyrexian Awakening, the 3 mana enchantment that incubates 4, and all the Phyrexians you control have vigilance. I'm surprised that it has 60% win rate. In terms of Hidden Gem, I picked Rayaf Mastersmith, one of the Multiverse Legend cards, the white-red one. Good in white-red, surprisingly. It has 56.7 win rate, which is okay. And it's picked quite late. Basically, whenever creature control that's enchanted or equipped attacks, that creature gains double strike until end of turn. I can imagine how this will generate some explosive starts if you play it. There is the short sword with vigilance. So yeah, that's going to be cool. And yeah, I think that this is the key to play white-red. You can do those Rayaf and maybe SRAM build arounds, put some things that generate multiple bodies, put equipment on those, and then force damage through. The trap I selected is the Sandblessed Guardian, 2 mana, 2/2. It transforms for 6 mana or 5 mana, and it transforms into a 3/3 that can generate an extra body. It has 50.1% win rate, and that's definitely not the number I want to see on my card. I think that this card is just, I guess, not impressive. Which other cards maybe are worth mentioning in the uncommon slot of this one? Old X, white, red. Norn's Inquisitor is good in here. Fearless Skull, the double striker with backup, is pretty good. Kenra Spell Shaper is pretty good, but nothing super impressive here, really. Okay, white-green. Best common, Overgrown Pest, 58.4. Card is still... I don't take the signpost for granted, gold links. I mean, sometimes I put them in my data, but I think I'll wait for the signpost evaluation for the episode about that. But yeah, Overgrown Pest is pretty good. So yeah, the signpost uncommon for white red is not great. It's like 55% win rate, so it's lower than Rayaf, for example. But okay, let's go back to the white green. Overgrown Pest doesn't have anything to do with the synergy, but it's still the best common, which is maybe telling. Hidden Gem, I think this is the second best card in the color combination in terms of win rate, is the Arachnoid Adaptation. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains reach until end of turn. Untap it. I think that the untap it part is essential. It basically can ambush something quite efficiently. Obviously, exercise caution when you're playing this card, because it can be a blowout if an opponent has removal in response. But still good numbers, 57.5% win rate. That's better than Rayaf that we mentioned as a hidden gem in the uncommon slot. So, something to be said. Again, low sample size warning, because it's not played as much as it probably should be. Because probably people try too much to play the counter synergy, but it doesn't work that amazingly. I selected the Attentive Skywarden as a trap, 49.2% win rate. It's just not good in this archetype, and it probably is not good in most archetypes. Just keep in mind, and the card is picked quite high. In terms of key uncommons, the best uncommon is Streetwise Negotiator, but look at the win rate. It's 58.4, which is not impressive at all. Still, it's a good card. It's just like I think that white green is not impressive. Hidden Gem, Shanna, Sisei's Legacy. It's one of the Multiverse Legends, 57% win rate. Gets +1/+1 for each creature you control. It's pretty solid, and I think points towards what you really want to do with white green. You want to play a wide board of creatures. 58.4 is not impressive, Pink Pants, for this set. I mean, we've seen commons that had a 63% win rate. It's solid, but it's not impressive. It's just basically white green is underperforming. You have to keep in mind that 17 lens users' average win rate is 57. So if your average win rate is 57, then of course 58.4 is just above that average. So just barely above average. In terms of a trap, Invasion of Moag. That's disappointing, 50.3% win rate. It's basically the battle that puts counters on everything. It seems like everything that the white green would want to do with the counter synergies, but it turns out that the counter synergies are just not so great. I think that how this deck wants to be playing is to minimize going all in on the counter synergies and focus on solid creatures, multiple bodies, and maybe, just maybe, play the plan of playing the +2/+1 to every creature instant. So yeah, that concludes the white green. Sand 101 bouncy. Which deck? I mean, this is basically limited, so I'm not having any. I mean, I can show you my trophy deck. I can do that after the seminar. Oh, the PowerPoint. Yeah, the PowerPoint. You need to be a patron to get the PowerPoint, but this is going to be on YouTube, so we can get it from there. But yeah, I encourage you to Patreon. That's fine. You will get many more of those slideshows. Blue black, as we mentioned, the best color combination in the set so far. Top common, preening champion, 64.7. This is impressive. So pink pants. These are the numbers that we're talking when we're talking about commons that are amazing. And yeah, this card is just great. Play it, draft it, abuse the fact that it's going still way too late. But the big surprise for me was the Ichor Drinker as a hidden gem at 63.8%. I'm sure that part of this number is piggybacking on the back of how good the deck is, but still 63.8 is a lot. And that brings it into place number 3 in the deck, just ex aequo with the Eyes of Gitaxias, which is a good card, and just above the Ephara's Dispersal. So there is some value in this card, and the lifelink early can give you just that cushion so that you're feeling comfortable all throughout the game. In terms of a trap, Ichor Shade, 45.5% win rate in the best archetype. That card is just garbage, so don't play it. When it comes to the uncommons, yeah, I mean, Ichor Drinker and Ichor Shade, two sides of the same Ichor. I definitely want to play the Drinker. In terms of uncommons, Invasion of Amonkhet, 66.9% win rate. That's the same number as Vorinclex, the mythic rare. So yeah, pretty impressive. Card, I thought it would be all right. I didn't think how all right it is. I played with it. It was great whenever I could play it. I managed to put my 4/4 through it and copy Hidetsugu and Kairi out of it to get a 4/4 version of Hidetsugu and Kairi. It was just lovely. I won that game, believe it or not. And of course, the fact that it's a disinformation campaign is really good because it makes it already a 2-for-1, and then you got this creature that can do many things. I told you, I flipped it, turned it into double striker, gave something else double strike, completely annihilated the combat. This card is like super scary to attack into if it's like on low counters and you think that opponent might have some kind of direct damage spell that will kill it. Hidden Gem, small sample size, but Render Inert has 63.8% win rate. So maybe the card is worth playing in this deck. And the trap that I selected is Invasion of Kamigawa. It's just the rate on this card looks too weak. 4 mana for tapping something and giving it stun counters. That's the effect that costs normally 2 mana. And then you flip it into this 2/3, which is slightly underwhelming. So you really want to limit the number of decks you're playing that utilize the card like that. 50.7% win rate again in the archetype that has 59% average win rate. So yeah. Blue-red, the best common. I mean, it's going to be a repeating story. That's Preening Champion. This card again busted, still busted. Nothing changed there. And in blue-red, it also gains the ability to help you with convoking stuff by generating this one silly elemental. 63.9% impressive. Then as a hidden gem, I selected Halo Hopper because it goes really late and it has good numbers. 59.1 is a solid win rate so far. Again, I was not a believer in this card, but I'm starting to turn around. It's a trap. I selected Ren's Resolve because that seems like a card that you want to be playing in this deck because you basically draw 2 cards. Maybe those expensive spells that you exile with it, you can convoke or something. But no, 51.5% win rate is not impressive. So be cautious of that. Oh, don't worry. Lewis will update it very soon. It will be 3.5 and everyone will be happy. Key uncommons for blue-red. The best uncommon, Tetsuko Umezawa. This is a card that has really solid numbers. I underappreciated, again, how good it's going to be. I thought it would be, like maybe a C plus level card, but it plays more like a B. So yeah, don't sleep on it. It has some cool interactions. If you get Ragavan and Tetsuko Mizawa is a pretty good combination. Uh, but plenty of other cards that are going to be good. Even the silly 4/1 haste vehicle with Tetsuko is great because you can actually tap Tetsuko to crew it, attack for 4 unblockables on turn 3. It's pretty sweet. Hidden Gem, because it goes still late in draft. Artistic Refusal, the 6 mana counter spell, and the archetype that probably will have the best situation in terms of being able to convoke expensive spells because it generates a lot of those elemental tokens. And 59.6% win rate is pretty solid. And the trap I selected is the Invasion of Regatha, 2 and a red for pink something for 1. Kill a battle or deal 4 damage to a battle or to opponent's face, and then flips into a 4/4. I think that maybe later in the format we're going to get some more value of those invasions, but I think right now people are still playing them suboptimally and also attacking them suboptimally, and that's I think and that I think is a problem with generally with the battles in the early format. I do agree with Gold Links that this battle will be really, really good when you have multiples. That's why I put it like in my set review, I put it as basically a red-green card that turns not to have any green in the mana cost, but maybe in some kind of a battle buster, red-green is going to be better. Blue-green, key commons, and the number 1 common is Ephara's Dispersal. It is always there in top 3 of blue commons in every archetype, but in this one it is actually stronger than the Preening Champion. It's probably because the plan of the blue-green is slightly different from the other blue decks. This one doesn't want to play this tempo aggressive game. This one wants to accrue value and play more expensive things later. And Ephara's Dispersal is a perfect tool to make you survive to that moment. It can help you develop the board while being immune to attacks and immune to people trying to flip their battles because you just pay 1 mana and bounce whatever was attacking the battle and move on with your life. 61.7% win rate at common is really strong. Don't get me wrong, Preening Champion is still really good in that archetype. It's just like 0.3 percentage points lower than this. Hidden Gem I selected is the Tidal Terror, the 6 mana 5/6 with island cycling and some other abilities. Whatever. You can tap 2 creatures and it gets unblockable. And it's probably something that you might be actually willing to use in this deck when your plan is to clog the board and then maybe finish it quickly with the Tidal Terror. Again, there are many bombs in this format, so you don't want to play the games too long unless you have like a bunch of counter spells to deal with those threats. So Tidal Terror is actually going to be pretty decent in that plan because it helps you to get to that 7 mana for your bigger things, and it also is a bigger thing if you are already at that high thing. And I think that this is the only land cycler that we will have in this presentation as the positive force. So yeah, Tidal Terror and the blue-green seems like a good thing. Again, yeah, Isaiah is mentioning that it's really good at flipping battles if you need to, because you can always tap 2 creatures and it's unblockable, flip a battle, move on with your life. Trap, Order of the Mirror, I selected. It is a transform card, which is sort of the theme of blue-green, but I guess it's the wrong kind of transform card because it's really good offensively, and it seems to me that this archetype wants to play defensive cards. And the win rate, 51.8, is not impressive at all. In terms of the key uncommons, the best uncommon of this deck, with pride and joy, I will announce it's Omen Hawker at 62.3. My trophy deck from earlier had 2 of those, and they were absolutely insane in that deck. I had like 14 transform cards, a bunch of incubate things. You play it on turn 1, turn 3, you play Eyes of Gitaxias, and you instantly have mana to flip that incubate token into a creature. So there's plenty of ways of using that mana. And when it becomes sort of a soul ring, this card is going to be really, really strong. And I think green-white has perfect conditions to make it into basically a Soul Ring on a stick. Hidden Gem, Emoti, Celebrant of Bounty, 5 mana, Cascade, 3/1 creature. Just that, and that's enough. The card has a 60% win rate. Don't argue with that. You're going to get it really late because not many people want to play it, and it's powerful and has good results. Oh yeah, it does more. Of course, it does more. Spells you cast with mana value 6 or greater have Cascade. But there's not so many of those spells. It still is going to be impressive when you cast, like, for instance, go Emoti into Tidal Terror or something like that. So it will do more in that situation. Renata, Color of the Hunt, is a trap, 51.7% win rate, and the card is picked very highly. I would avoid it. I would probably avoid it in any archetype. It just doesn't have the numbers. So for now, unless you figure out how to play a good counter synergy deck, but that might be tricky. Okay, move to black red. The best common is Volcanic Spite. No surprises there. 60.9% win rate. The hidden gem I selected is the Hunger Scrounger. Card that I speculate on Twitter is going to be good, and it actually is good in this archetype. It has 58.2% win rate. I think that this makes a good impression of the Scrapwork mat, as you can play it and instantly enable an attack and enable yourself to rummage, and then later you can rummage with it, or actually you can use it to crew the Marauding Dreadnought, and then you tap it for crew and you get rummage for free, which is a great way of utilizing this card. So I would say this card is good, should be played more, and the numbers from Black Red at least confirm it, and I'm pretty sure it could be also good in other decks, especially when you play vehicles in them. The trap I selected for this archetype, Vanquish the Weak. It has really bad numbers in this archetype, and I don't know why, but I thought it would be rude for me not to report it. 51.4% win rate for a card that's picked as a prime common. So yeah, keep that in mind. Key uncommons, the best uncommon is the Furnace Rains, the Threaten effect. Obviously, it's going to be good if you have sacrifice outlets, and you will in those colors most likely. Scornblade Berserker is the one that I selected as a hidden gem. That's the 1 mana backup one that gives a creature an ability to sacrifice it and draw a card. This is actually a really good card to play with Furnace Rains. You can steal something, put a +1/+1 counter on it, attack, and then you sacrifice it to draw a card. So yeah. For the trap, I selected Completed Huntmaster. That's the 3 mana 2/3 that has a 1-tap sacrifice another creature you can or artifact, incubate 3. It looks like something that would go into this deck because it's a cheap sacrifice outlet, and actually incubate 3 is a lot, but for some reason it just has poor numbers. So be wary of that card. I think maybe that the 2/3 body is just not good enough for this format, and that might be the reason. I would gamble a bet that it would have been better as a 1/4, for example, in this archetype, because at least it would be you could block with it reliably and when you play it. Otherwise, no. Maybe it's working in some kind of a blue-black with Omen Hawkers. Okay, black-green, that's one of the good archetypes. So worth watching what makes them tick. Deadly Derision is the best common at 61%. 61% for a common is really spectacular. Then the hidden gem I selected is Bladed Battle Fan. It has a very small sample size, but 59.7% win rate. For a card that goes super late, I'm going to at least try to test it. The card that has disappointing numbers, and I was looking forward to this card and how well it's going to be playing. Etched Familiar, 2 and a black for 3/2 artifact creature, and when it dies, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. I was expecting it to be like a solid common, like a 56, 57% win rate card. But in black-green, at least, it only has 51% win rate. So yeah, I'm not saying not play it, but I'm saying play it cautiously. Key uncommons, and here another like big miss for my set review. I was very low on the Invasion of Eldraine. 4 mana, when it enters the battlefield, target opponent discards 2 cards. I thought it's going to be just rubbish, but it turns out that this format just slow enough and has just enough like expensive bomby cards that you might pluck with this at the right time. That it actually is pretty good. 62.3 in this deck. Now, keep in mind, black-green is not the deck that looks to me like it wants to really attack aggressively. I mean, just look at what the cards you have. The Deadly Derision is good. Bladed Battle Fan probably played defensively is a good card. Tangled Skyline is the hidden gem at 61% win rate and still picked not highly enough. That's the card that screams to me I want to play a long game. And it's probably in part because Black has such a good removal suite, and you also get access to things like the Invasion of Lorwyn. So you can play that longer game because you have answers to the bombs that might be threatening you later in the game. And because of that, you can play cards that cost more but have a huge impact on the game and allow you to stay alive longer, like the Tangled Skyline. And then you can, flip the Invasion of Eldraine or something and start pinging them for 2 every turn, even without the need of attacking. Or force them to play awkwardly and have 2 cards in their hand at any time. And again, I selected Renata as a trap because 49.8% win rate is really low for a card that's picked as a prime uncommon. So yeah. And we have the last color combination in red-green. Best common is Volcanic Spite, but only 58.7% win rate, which is not impressive at all. It's not bad, but it's not impressive. It just shows you that red-green is not doing particularly well. A hidden gem is again Marauding Dreadship. This card is doing way better than probably most have thought. And it's also doing decently in the red-green. The fact that it can attack with haste is useful when you want to play sort of attack the battles plan. And even if it dies, it leaves the incubator token behind, so that's not bad. Trap card, the Karsus Depth card, 3 mana, 4/3 defender, and when it has power 5 or greater, it can attack as though it didn't have defender. Turns out it's not the Drowsy Tyrannodon. It turns out that adding 1 mana to a card and just adding 1 power to it makes it way weaker. I'm confident if it was a 4/4, it would have been much better, but it's not. So avoid it at all costs, even in this archetype. Mike's having a good comment. Red-green being not good feels like the most likely to dramatically change as people figure out how to play battles more effectively. Possibly, but it also can have a flip side of people figuring out how to play against battles more effectively. So maybe it will neutralize itself. I think that the problem is in part low quality of red creatures. They are not so impressive, and if you want to attack battles, you better have impressive creatures. And it turns out that the things that I thought might be good, like the 3/3 that gets indestructible when it attacks the battle, and the 2/2 for 2 that gets +1/+1 when it attacks the battle, didn't pan out to be as good as I thought. In terms of the uncommons for the red-green, Tangled Skyline again, top uncommon, so that card is definitely being slept on, and also it points to maybe red-green should be less aggressive. Maybe it should be more like ramp into big stuff and dominate the game with the big things. So yeah. Hidden gem I selected is the Fearless Skull, the 5 mana 3/2 double striker, and has backup 1. It can again lead to some kind of serious blowouts when you put the counter on something with trample and you give it double strike. 60.9% win rate, also really solid. This card is also going pretty late. I can check exactly. Red uncommons. Yeah. Okay, it goes relatively late. It will wheel like 30% of the time, maybe 40. So, for one of the top uncommons, wheeling at all is impressive. Even keeping in mind that this set has multiple uncommons. So yeah, play this card more, I guess, is my bottom line. And the card that is a trap, Kami of the Whispered Hopes, 3 mana for a 1/1, and that 1/1 is just not enough. It gives you the sort of hardened scales effect, and it taps for X mana of any color where X is its power. So if you put a counter on it, it taps for 3 mana, but it's just not enough. 50% win rate is very bad for the 17 lands users bracket for an uncommon that has to be picked relatively highly. Okay, that concludes the part when I talk about individual cards for each color pair. Now let's move to the openness. So what is openness? This is a metric that I calculate every time that a new format comes out. And it basically tells you how many good cards you will see from each color pair per pod on average in a draft. Obviously, that doesn't mean that you can pick all of those cards, because you will see multiples of the good cards in the pack and you can only pick one of them. But it is a good indicator of which colors you can sort of blindly try to force draft. I mean, I'm never going to say that you should force drafting, but you should definitely think about possibilities of becoming of getting on a particular deck. And how do I calculate how many good cards you will see? So basically, we know this ALSA metric of how late the cards go. Based on that, I can calculate how many of the particular card you will see in each pack. And then I look at the cards that have over 56% win rate in each color pair, and I calculate how many of those cards will you see per each color combination. And for example, in case of Demir, it's 48 right now. So in an average draft, you will see 48 good Demir cards per pod. First question already from Gold Links. Thanks for those questions, by the way. I really do appreciate having those questions, because they make it easier for me to run it, and also they also make it that I don't know what people understand or not when I'm presenting. I try to guess it as best as I can, but I can't be in the head of other people. This helps me to sort of answer the potential common doubts of other people. Gold Blinks asks, this looks pretty unbalanced. Are these numbers normal? Yeah, these numbers are pretty normal. Actually, normally they're less balanced. This one is actually quite well distributed. But what we see from those numbers is that we have 5 colors that are more open and 5 colors that are less open. All the white combinations are slightly more open because all the blue combinations are slightly more open because blue cards are strong. This is the problem with that metric. If there are strong cards in the format, you will see more of those cards because they are strong, and it's sort of like you never know what is the reason for the openness. Is it because the cards go late, or is it because the cards are strong? In this case, I think it's a mixture, because the good blue cards also go late. But you see like 48 Demir cards per pod on average, 42 Azorius cards, good Azorius cards per pod, 40 Golgari, 34 Simic, and 34 Izzet cards. That's quite a lot. It means that in most situations, you will, if you get the average card number of the cards per pod as calculated, you'll be able to build a deck. So you have to be slightly unlucky not to get enough cards to be playable, to be able to play a particular color combination. Spirited Companion says that, can this roughly be translated into the colors with the most good cards? Not only, it's more than that. It does tell you about colors with most good cards, but it also tells you about openness. Because, for example, Volcanic Spite is a strong card, but it's picked so early that even though you will open like 1.9 Volcanic Spites per pod, you will only see maybe 0.5 of them because people will pick them. But if you open, let's say, what kind of example can I give? Commons, all decks. So So yeah, Volcanic Spite has also 3, so it will never wheel. For example, you will probably see 3. You will probably see like less than 1 of them per pod. But a card like Eyes of Gitaxias will almost always wheel, which means that you will see almost every copy of it open. So you'll see 1.9 of them. So this takes that into account. So not only how strong is the card, but also how many of them you will see, because how open they are at the average pod on Arena. So even though Volcanic Spite is as strong as Eyes of Gitaxias, you will see only less than half of the amount of Volcanic Spite. That's why Azorius is going to be stronger, because not only you have strong cards, but they go quite late. That's the reason. Why is Golgari on there? I don't know. I mean, I put the names for the colors because some people operate in them. And yes, Witherbloom is a nice name. But then we open a can of worms, and then all of a sudden I have to write Ragrim instead of Timur, and everyone is angry. So yeah, but so basically the 5 colors that are open are Dimir, Azorius, Golgari, Simic, and Izzet. And then colors like Rakdos, Orzhov, Selesnya, Gruul, and Boros will have between 18 and 12 open cards per pod of the good ones. And that means that very often you will not be able to build a deck filled only with good cards. And this means that you will have decks filled with substandard cards. And if you have a deck filled with substandard cards, you are more likely to lose. So the solution to that is, of course, because you don't want to completely avoid playing those 5 colors, the solution to that is you want to, dabble in them. And when you already get 5 good Rakdos cards in the first 5 picks, then those numbers change dramatically, because, of course, you have a good chance of opening still at least, 12 of them in the pack 2 and 3 on average. Maybe you get a bit higher than average, and you're going to get that deck into a playable condition. Or if you utilize maybe slightly cards with a slightly lower win rate, that will make up their lack of power with a bunch of synergy. Thanks to someone for the sub, by the way. I can't see whom. I'm going to tell it after we finish this presentation. But yeah, Rakdos, Orzhov, Selesnya, Gruul, and Boros have markedly fewer good cards open per pod, partially because they're overdrafted, because white is overdrafted in general, and partially because there are fewer of those good cards. So here is just like the last graph when I show you the link between win rate of the deck and the openness. And again, this can be interpreted in 2 ways. More open colors have stronger cards, or colors have higher win rate because they're more open. We don't know which one is fully true. I still didn't figure out a good way of measuring which one contributes to what. If someone has ideas, I'm open to suggestions. Yeah, and this is the end of the seminar for this week. And before I go, I would like to thank 17 Lands team, who are, it's amazing that so early in the format we already have so much data around. So thanks to 17 Lands team, because I know how hard they worked on getting this online, especially Viral Misnomer and Ale Ballini. They are now the main forces pulling the release of every set. Also, I would like to thank my sponsor, mtgazone.com. Please do read some of my articles. There are some really good ones about how to wheel, for example. This might be very important in this format. I would like to thank Fake Jake Brown, who is helping me with releasing this in the podcast version. And as we're on the topic of the podcast, to very well-named Magic Junkie and Asescu, who made the music that I'm using. Of course, thanks to all my patrons, my numerous patrons who are helping me keeping motivated to release that every week. And with that, I'll see you next week.